This system is running a Ryzen 9 5950X and an RTX 3090. It's got 32 gigabytes of RAM. The motherboard is the Asus Crosshair 8 formula. The CPU cooler is the NZXT Z73 Kraken. The power supply is an 850 watt power supply from Asus. Despite the high cost of this machine, it's got quite a few issues. Most notably, it's been freezing a lot and freezing consistently. So we're gonna boot it up and see if I can replicate the issue. Alright, the PC didn't exactly freeze, but it did blue screen while I was only changing some fan curve settings in NZXT Cam. It says it's gonna restart the PC, but I've been sitting here for about 15 minutes, says 100% complete, and nothing is happening. Interestingly, this keyboard has a feature where if you press the caps lock button, it'll turn the light underneath white to indicate that caps lock is on. That's clearly not working. Can't have a mouse either. So I pretty much have no choice but to just hard reset this thing. It's barely been 5 minutes since I just hard reset the PC, and I'm trying to download the debugging tool for Windows so I can take a look at the dump file created by the blue screen. But the PC is actually frozen. I'm moving my mouse right now and nothing is happening. And the same issue as before on the keyboard. The lights are still changing, but caps lock's not turning white. The first component I'm thinking to check is the RAM. The RAM kit in this PC right now is a set of 4 sticks of 8 gigabytes, DDR4 running at 3600 megahertz. And this set is, I believe, probably about to turn 3 years old. I have my own kit of DDR4, which is running at 2400 megahertz. It's a set of 2 sticks of 8, but I'm confident that there's no issues with it, and I have not had a single issue with it for the past 7 years. So I'm gonna hard shut this down and put my own RAM kit into this PC, and we'll see if it still freezes. The PC is frozen again, even with my RAM kit installed. As you can see, it stopped at 10 minutes and 6 seconds. I did have hardware info open to monitor the RAM voltage, which is at a consistent 1.2, exactly where it should be. I still believe that the issue with this computer is something hardware related. It's not the RAM kit itself, but it's probably something related to the RAM. I'm going to check dual channel functionality next, and if that's the problem, it'll mean that this machine needs a new motherboard, which is quite unfortunate considering how thin the supply of both X570 and B550 boards are today. I ran 2 more tests on this machine. The first one with just a single RAM stick installed in the rightmost channel, as recommended by the motherboard manual. And another test with PBO disabled on the processor, locking it to its base speed of 3.4 gigahertz. Both tests still saw the PC hard freeze in under 20 minutes, just like before. But as you can see right now, the machine has been on for over 3 hours. That is because I've had Cyberpunk running, which I loaded from my laptop, and that tells me that the freezing has been caused by faulty power saving settings, which I will go into the BIOS and disable shortly. This allows me to get a head start on the other problems this PC has. First up, this 3090 only has 2 power cables. NVIDIA says that it will draw up to 350 watts of power, but this is an overclocked card from Asus, so it'll probably draw around 400 watts. You would definitely want 3 separate cables in this. And 3090s can saturate up to 16 PCIe lanes. It is currently in the bottom slot on this motherboard, locking it to 8 lanes right now. I will try to move it up into this top slot, but the clearance does seem a little tight. Luckily, Asus did provide a Gen 4 PCIe riser cable, but that means I'll probably have to purchase a GPU vertical mounting bracket for this case. I'm not super worried about the GPU getting choked up against the front glass panel because it is practically being choked by its own cables right now. The last issue that the owner says this computer has is the CPU has been getting really hot. And as we can see, he's definitely right. This machine is pretty much always been 4 degrees away from turning itself off. Oddly enough, the cooler seems to be running pretty well. The liquid temperature is decent, and the fan and the pump are both maxed out. They are on NZXT's default performance curve through NZXT Cam. The GPU power is right here, and it is drawn a maximum of 389 watts. I will compare this number to when I have 3 cables plugged into it to see if we get any improvement. But I'll start with repacing the CPU and seeing if the temps go down. This is the one setting that I changed in the BIOS. I booted the PC and let it sit with only Task Manager open for 9 hours and it didn't freeze. So this seems to be the culprit. Unfortunately, the CPU will not enter some power saving states, but this is a desktop, it doesn't really matter that much. I just removed the heatsink from the CPU, and honestly, the paste application looks pretty good. It's pretty consistent. It's not really dry at all. And here it is on the copper plate. And if anything, there might be too much rather than too little. The spread looks pretty good, but I'll still replace it and see if the temps are any better. These are the results I got from my last run of 3D Mark Time Spy before repasting the CPU. As you can see, the CPU temperature is pretty much at 91 degrees the entire time, which is really odd and really bad. And the CPU seems to be thermal throttling. Towards the end of the CPU test, we have 2 pretty massive drops in CPU speed down to 2 gigahertz. It's been about a day since I repasted the CPU, and judging from these new Time Spy results, nothing has really improved. The CPU is still hovering at around 90 degrees the entire time, despite the CPU utility only being between 20 and 30% for the 2 graphics tests. Oddly enough, the CPU is still boosting to really good speeds. The all-core speed shown here is pretty much around 4.6 gigahertz the entire time. And if we take a look at the individual speeds, a couple cores are hitting the advertised maximum of 4.9. I was looking at these sensors up here earlier while playing Cyberpunk, but apparently these are kind of an overestimate of the temperature. But as we can see from the individual maximum temperatures from each of the individual cores, a couple of them are hitting 90. And the sensor that I believe 3D Mark is reading from is the CPU package on the motherboard, which is hitting 91. These are the graphs after running Time Spy on my own PC, which has an Intel i7 7700K and a GTX 1060. This machine was built 7 years ago and it has not had its thermal paste replaced since. As you can see from the CPU temps, they are much more reasonable, especially during the first 2 tests, than compared to the 5950X. It does get really hot towards the end, but that is because I am overclocking this thing to 4.8 gigahertz. It has a base speed of 4.2 and is rated to boost up to 4.5. The CPU package power maxed out at 89 watts. This is much less than what the 5950X is drawing, but these 2 CPUs probably couldn't be more different in terms of architecture, and it has 4 times the cores. But I think this still goes to show that the 5950X is not running at the temperatures it should be. I just finished this much longer CPU focus benchmark, and as you can see from the CPU utility graph here, this benchmark tested different numbers of CPU threads. Despite this, the CPU temperature remained exactly how we saw it during the 2 Time Spy tests, just hovering around 90 the entire time. However, this time I also had my hands on the 2 AIO tubes, and this one over here was considerably hotter the entire time than this tube. This makes me believe that there is a clog within this AIO. This is not the only problem I've had with this cooler. Between adjusting some cables and switching in and out RAM kits and just moving the PC case as a whole, this breakout cable right here has gotten slightly nudged pretty much every single time, and this results in the screen turning on, the RGB lights for the fans turning on, but the fans themselves not spinning. This caused the PC to instantly shut down as the CPU would hit 95 degrees. The NZXT Kraken Z73 is discontinued by its manufacturer. I'm uncertain of this particular unit's status under warranty, and due to its closed-loop nature, fixing it is going to be much more trouble than it's worth. I talked to the owner and he's good with switching to air cooling, so I got this Phantom Spirit 120 Evo, and it'll hopefully keep the 5950X under control. With this air cooler, we'll need much better airflow through this case, so I got 10 of these Thermalright ARGB fans, and they'll all be hooked up to this PWM ARGB fan hub. While I was removing the cooler, I realized that these two couplings next to the pump have turned yellow, but the two couplings next to the radiator are both fine. This is pretty odd, as the liquid inside these AIOs is usually a mixture of water and ethylene glycol, both of which are clear. I'm not sure if the discoloration of the couplings themselves or the discoloration of the liquid is a result of the clog, but either way, it isn't good. I've installed the 10 fans and the new cooler. I've also moved the GPU up to the top PCIe slot and added its third power cable. The only issue I've run into during installation was the fact that the front fan for the cooler would have had to sit on top of the RAM sticks, and due to these tall RGB heat spreaders, it would have been touching the front glass panel. Therefore, I moved them behind the towers to be pulling air through them instead of pushing air through them. Looking at the time spy results, the score is already much better than before. These temperatures are also a lot better. The CPU is floating between 60 and 70 the entire time, and the clock speeds are also a lot better. They're floating between 4.7 and 4.9 gigahertz, it seems, throughout the entire test. Taking a look at GPU-Z, the GPU is in fact running at 16 PCIe lanes now. And looking at these maximum clock speeds, a lot more of the cores are hitting this maximum of 4.9 gigahertz. The temperatures for all the cores look pretty good. One core is maxing out at 82, with the rest of them being much lower. Both of the CPU sensors and the motherboard look pretty good. And the GPU is now drawing up to 478 watts, up from 389. I've also removed all the fan control software from this computer. All the fan speeds are now being controlled through the BIOS, and all the lights are being controlled in OpenRGB. I believe this will make for a much cleaner experience on the desktop. And with that, pretty much everything with this computer is good. I'll be running a couple more stress tests just to see if this system is now stable, and that's about it.